Having a business benefit focus, the key to PMO success. I'm Kevin Aguanno. I've been in the project management community for over 30 years. I've written chapters or books on project management, over 30 of them. I've done academic research on project management. I teach it at the university level at several universities. I have all kinds of PM training and awards. I'm well known in the field, and I want to bring this experience to you. I've worked in the PMO space and across many organizations, helping build PMOs, transform or improve PMOs, helping organizations even sort of reset their PMOs because the initial launch might not have gone so well, and they're not getting the support and buy-in that they're looking for from the business. So I've created this presentation today because I've realized that a lot of PMOs have the wrong focus. They're caught up on time, on budget, on scope, and that's not always what the business needs or what the business is looking for. So I'm going to start my presentation first by discussing the recent evolution of PMO standards, right? Or PM standards. PM standards have been changing. They've never sat still for very long. And what a lot of people might not know is there's a direction to this. We could have foreseen where the standards were going 20, 30 years ago. We could have predicted where they are now, and we can see where they're still headed. There's a path, there's a direction to it, and it's quite evident. So we're going to talk about that so you can understand this evolution of PM standards, because it'll inform how we got to where we are and where we're going. After that, we're going to talk about what is this end goal? What is this end state that we're trying to get towards? What is the point of all this? And how you as a PMO leader can get ahead of the curve on this. You can either, as an individual, and improve your skills to get ready for that future state, or help evolving your PMO in that direction. And we will take time for Q&A at the end of this presentation. We've got 45 minutes. We've got a lot to cover, so I'm just going to jump right in. So let's talk about the recent evolution of PM standards. It's interesting. The traditional view of project management, if you want to call it the traditional view, sort of harkens back to what we see in the 1996 edition of the PMBOK guide, the Guide to the Project Management Body of Knowledge, produced by PMI. Up until that point, there was something called the PM Body of Knowledge. It was created by a Canadian, Max Weidman, in 1987. But it was sort of an index to all the different things that a PM needs to know. I have a copy on my bookshelf here. It's a binder with a bunch of different stuff. It's sort of an index to a table of contents, or an index to all the topics PM should probably know something about. But it didn't provide necessarily a framework around this knowledge to help you organize it and understand it, and build courses around it and methodologies and things like that. So in 1996, the director of standards for PMI started a project to create a new version of this document. But instead of being the body of knowledge, because they realized there's too much stuff in project management to fill a book, it'd be a bookshelf at least, they said we should probably just call it the Guide to the Body of Knowledge. So the PMBOK guide. And we will give people some generally good to know information about projects and project management, because every project's a little bit different. You can't say what applies to each individual project generically. It needs to be broad enough that most projects, most of the time, could benefit from this information. Now, the person in charge of this 1996 edition, the first version of the PMBOK guide, was a friend of mine, Bill Duncan. He worked for PMI, and Bill Duncan he wrote this initial PMBOK guide. Every word in it came out of his fingers onto a keyboard. There was a committee, and the committee participated in some of the conceptualization around what to put in this. And then he sat down and wrote the first draft. There's a lot of history and a story behind this I'll get to maybe on some other presentation or talk. So he created that first draft. Then there's some back and forth on wording, a few edits back and forth. And finally, we came up with the version of the PMBOK guide that many of us old timers are familiar with. Came out in 1996. This was the first edition of the PMBOK guide. Now, this had some particular biases or focuses. Duncan did a lot of defense contract project management. So he was, as a contractor, to the government agency. So he, in a lot of cases, he had the contractor view. So my project is the scope of the work that the government signed a contract or purchase order with me for. So it's not the entire breadth of a project. The project in his mind starts when the contract is signed. Once the contract is signed, you assign a PM to go deliver the scope that was mentioned in that contract. So it's very much a contractor mindset. Project starts on contract signing. Now, realizing there's probably stuff about the project that happens before then. In the contract, somebody had to put a budget for the project, a timeline for the project. There's probably some requirements mentioned in the contract, or at least there better be. None of that was actually mentioned in this document. In fact, the PMBOK guide, the first version, only mentioned requirements twice, just in passing. It wasn't a big deal. It's assumed that was all pre-project stuff, which really isn't true from the broader perspective. The project, even if you're a contractor, the project from your client's perspective, from the sponsor's perspective, started well before we sign a contract. Somebody had to define what this thing is, put a business case together, get it approved, get some funding, issue RFPs, get quotes from vendors, figure out how the strategy of how we're going to be doing this, and then start issuing contracts to vendors. There's a lot of project work going on before a contract is signed. But similarly, at the back end, there's stuff that's different too, because again, from a contractor's perspective, the project ends when you hand over the deliverables to the client. But from the client's perspective, there may be a whole bunch of rollout and benefits realization work and stuff that happens after that, training, support, warranty periods. There's other stuff happening that is project related. So this initial PMBOK guide was criticized as being a little bit too narrow in its focus. Now, there were a few other versions of the PMBOK guide, right? There was the 2000 edition, 2004 edition. There were a few updates, but they were mostly wordsmithing, clarifying some pieces. There wasn't really a transformational change in the PMBOK guide until the 5th edition. So 2013, PMI issued version 5 of the PMBOK guide, and that introduced stakeholder management as a new knowledge area. So they actually added a whole other knowledge area just around stakeholders, which is at the front of the project before the contract is signed. You need to sit down with stakeholders and understand their requirements and the politics around the project and their acceptance criteria. All of that got added in as a new piece of content in the PMBOK guide. PMI saw that this view of a project as just being delivery of a contract is too narrow. It's too restrained. The project actually started earlier than that when we were trying to figure out what this initiative is and what are the requirements. And so in version 5 of the PMBOK guide, they added in some of that upfront work with all the stakeholder management. And now we have a lot more discussion around requirements and requirements prioritization and stakeholder analysis, and all that stuff happens up front, much more focus on that. And the next year, PMI actually introduced a new certification, and it was their first one that wasn't a PM-related certification. It's called the PMI Professional Business Analyst, PBA. What's a business analyst do? They're the one working with the stakeholders, gathering the requirements, prioritizing things, trying to figure out the business strategy. So they started to move into that upfront part of called the pre-project work based on their old view. And that was a transformational change. It was a recognition that the project does start earlier than they initially thought. There was a version 6, which started to talk a little bit about some introduction to some discussion of Agile, but the real big transformation after that happened with the current version of the PMBOK guide, version 7. In 2021, version 7 of the PMBOK guide was introduced, and for the first time, this wasn't an evolution of the standard. It was a revolution of the standard. It was completely rewritten from the ground up. It's a complete rethink and repositioning of project management for the first time since the mid-90s. So it was a long time coming. Now, not only did we have this upfront stuff in the 5th edition added, which was all the requirements and the stakeholder analysis, now this version 7 took an entire life cycle view and started to look at the end of the project. And we saw the introduction of discussions around organizational change management as a required PM skill. Because I could deliver things on time, on budget, on scope, and the project could still be a huge failure, because we could deliver something but not have prepared people to accept it, not have done the messaging and the training and the downstream strategies around how we're going to support and maintain this thing down the road. We may not have considered all those other subsidiary activities. We'll just, we'll hand over the deliverables, walk away. And if people weren't prepared to receive those deliverables, they're not going to get used, and the benefits aren't achieved. The project's a failure. So in 2021, PMI started talking about organizational change management as a required PM skill. But we saw this coming. I mean, I was doing presentations talking about how change management is going to be added into the PM tool belt probably 7-8 years before that, maybe earlier. We saw this coming. There was discussions in different PMI forums. People knew this was the next thing that was showing up. Now, what is the focus of organizational change management? To achieve business case benefits. It's not about on time, on budget. It's about, did we actually earn or receive the benefits, the value that we were looking for out of this project in the first place? We made a big investment in this project. We put time, we've put time, into the pot. We put some money into the pot. We took a risk that this thing may or may not work out. We want to see that we've actually got the benefits we were looking for those investments. So it's all about business case benefits. And in fact, Appendix 3 of the PMBOK guide, version 7 of the PMBOK guide, it talks about the role of the PMO, and it's the first time the PMO is really talked about in the PMBOK guide, and says the focus of the PMO is to aim at benefits realization. It's all about this business case and getting the returns on these projects that we're looking for. So the PMO governance should be there to protect the business case, making sure the project is delivering the business case. The PMO itself, it shouldn't be creating processes and structures that are creating lots of process burden without actually showing value for the burden, because there's probably a business case justifying the PMO's existence as well. PMI also produced a document called the PMO Quick Tip Guide. This was produced just before 2021, but here's a couple quotes from it. A strong PMO is one that can link its performance to the overall goals of the organization. So again, it's tied to delivering business strategy, essentially. And recommended metrics in the PMO Quick Tip Guide include two interesting ones. One is a percentage of projects and programs delivering their expected business outcomes is a key metric for the PMO should be reporting on. It's used to measure the success of the PMO. And another one is the actual delivery of benefits versus the planned benefits. We planned on delivering these benefits, but did we actually achieve them? It's all about getting that business value delivered. So over time, we've gone through several editions of the PMBOK guide. We're currently on version 7 of the PMBOK guide, but there's other international standards out there other than just the one from PMI. Earlier, I talked about in my introduction about IPMA, the International Project Management Association. They have their own standards that started well before PMI's. In fact, version 3 of the international standard, the IPMA competence baseline, international competence baseline. This is a project management competence standard, the things PMs need to know. The version 3 came out in 99, just after version 1 of PMI's standard. And that version 3 already talked about benefits realization. It talked about the upfront stuff about stakeholders and understanding the business case. And it talked about the end stuff, the organizational change management, about achieving that business case. The current version, version 4, was from 2015, and that's the one that's currently in place now. So they've been working on standards as well, much longer than PMI, and they've always had this end-to-end view, this broader picture view, as well as other organizations like in Japan, the JPMF and organizations like that have their own standards for project management that are broader in thinking than the PMBOK guide. So PMI has seen this international competition, and they've been evolving their standard into that broader perspective as well. And that evolution is still going to continue. They're closer now, but there's still some improvement still to be made. So what is this end state? What is everybody trying to achieve? And really, it's about think about the goal of project governance, right? Why do we have governance? Well, the PMBOK guide says it's the framework, functions, and processes that guide project management activities in order to create a unique service, product, or result to meet organizational, strategic, and operational goals. It's about helping the organization achieve its objectives. So it's a bit of a different view than we had in the older versions of the PMBOK guide. It's linking it now back to the business in a much tighter way. So governance, one of the roles of a PMO is to provide some governance, is really about supporting those goals. Prince 2 is another standard you might be familiar with. It comes from the UK Office of Government Commerce. They created it, and they've now moved it outside of the government into a sort of a shared agency, part owned by the government, part owned by private interests, trying to commercialize and spread the use of Prince 2. And they say the governance of projects ensures that an organization's project portfolio is aligned to the organization's objectives and is delivered efficiently and is sustainable. So we got some sustainability elements added in there, but also efficiency. So again, focused on achieving business benefits. And lastly, if you want to look at the International Competence Baseline from IPMA, it says that project governance is the established structured systems and processes that support projects and influence the way they're organized, implemented, and managed. So as a PMO, we should be influencing how our projects are organized, managed, and structured, and also be looking to achieve these business benefits that are the real reason why the project was funded or created in the first place. So let's dive in a bit deeper. So what are some of the practices that we should be looking at, right? There's a number of different ways of doing this. What are some of the common governance practices? Well, there's general governance practices. Make sure each project has an approved business case, right? We're not just doing projects for the fun of it. Use feedback from past projects or how a project is going to improve the chance of achieving these business outcomes. We have steering committees and project, control boards and stuff. And the role of those people are to make sure that the business case benefits are delivered. It's all about protecting the business case. Why do we do risk management, right? To protect the business value delivery. So all of our project management governance practices should be focused on business case outcomes, business case delivery. And here's an example. What does this look like in professional services firms like law firms, accounting firms, engineering firms? Well, some of the metrics they use, like to measure their project success, gross profit, to measure the business benefits, or customer satisfaction metrics, which are really around what's the likelihood of more opportunities to deliver value as a supplier based on our project success. So it's about business outcomes, business benefits. So we keep talking about business outcomes, business benefits. So what is that? What is business value? Warren Buffett says, price is what you pay, value is what you get, right? It's the deliverables, the outcome, right? It's a measure of achievement. It comes from the business context. It's the underlying context for decision making. Decisions should be made to protect or manage value, and we should be looking at value as something that comes out of our strategy, and the governance around that should be making sure that we create value. So benefits realization delivers that value, protects that value, make sure that we make decisions more transparently and consistently so there's no surprises, right? Make sure that we use the same criteria when we're assessing projects and prioritizing things. Make sure the projects are realizing those benefits by tracking and measuring this value achievement. Confirm that the money that we spent was reasonable for the value that we achieved. So we might want to prioritize scope items by looking at the value delivery. Don't do things that aren't going to have a return on investment. That might not be a good idea, wise choice. And it'll help us deal with stakeholders and even including the employees that are working on the project by showing that we're making these decisions with open, transparent criteria when we're making decisions and prioritizing things, it's all about achieving the value that we were seeking when we approved the project in the first place. So governance and strategy kind of go together. Governance is how we make sure the strategy is delivered. Both of those are a key part of business value in achieving the business value. And that's the outcome of that are these benefits. So how does a PMO affect business value? Well, first of all, do you have this business benefits realization approach, right? Making sure we're trying to optimize the value delivery on our projects, look at efficiencies, look at prioritization, look at is everything traceable back to the business case, right? Are we doing tasks just because we normally do, or are these tasks actually moving us closer to getting the value that we're looking for? But we also got to look at risk. What are the threats to us achieving that business case and trying to optimize the project around risks, because risks threaten that business delivery, and also resources. We're also responsible as a PMO, not just to look at the portfolio risk, but also look at the resource use. In some PMOs, we manage pools of resources, and we're trying to prioritize and schedule projects across pools of shared resources. So we want to make sure that the resources are available for the highest value delivery projects, and constantly monitor that and juggle back and forth to make sure that the overall value delivery of the portfolio is optimized. There may be times that we pull resources off one project to give to another. That shouldn't be just because we're firefighting. That should be managed, planned, and strategic, because we're trying to balance the entire portfolio based on changing criteria. But the PMO needs to look at this whole series of elements, because they're all affecting the expected business value coming out not just of an individual project, but from the entire project portfolio. I mean, let's look at a project lifecycle, right? You start up a project, you're producing the project charter where we set expectations on budgets and timelines and constraints. Then there's the startup phase of a project where you're doing the preparing the estimates and building a plan, trying to figure out what this looks like. Then you go and deliver your deliverables through a series of milestones through the execution phase of the project. And then we get out to closing the project after we formally get acceptance, which includes our lessons learned and our post-project reviews and things like that. That is our traditional view of what projects are. But if you think about what I've been saying, projects actually start before that. There's the feasibility study. Should we be doing this project or not? Maybe some initial early estimates, doing a cost benefit analysis, right? To see, is the project worth it, that leads to the business case. And after the project is delivered everything and we've done our lessons learned and closed it out, there's still this whole period of time where we're trying to earn the benefits from this project still. My success on this project as a sponsor does not end when the deliverables land on my doorstep. It's measured months or years later when we say, did we actually achieve all those benefits that were the reason why we justified this project in the first place? So everything hinges on a business case. And what's a business case? Well, the body of knowledge of the UK's National Project Management Association, called the APM, the Association for Project Management, they say a business case provides justification for undertaking the project, program, or portfolio, and it evaluates the benefits, costs, and risk of other alternative options and provides the rationale about why you chose the approach that you did. So it's not just we blindly do every project the same way. We need to evaluate alternate strategies, waterfall versus agile, for example, and see which one is going to give me the best chance of achieving my business case outcomes. And we need to justify those choices. And this gives us the basis for that, right? A business case does a cost benefit analysis to decide, is the project worth it? But what goes into the business case? Well, we need to know the costs. The costs come from a schedule. Wait, you can't figure out the costs until you know the schedule, because the longer the project takes, the more it might cost, the more time you have to rent equipment and have staff sitting around and paying insurance and finance costs. The schedule comes from estimates, and estimates, what are we estimating? The scope or the functional requirements. So we're estimating the scope. Scope, schedule, and costs are our old triple constraints, right? For project management. What am I going to get for my money? How long is it going to take? And how much is it going to cost? Those are the decisions that people make to decide, is the project worth it? And where does those requirements come from? From a design, probably. Somebody's designed a solution. These are the functional elements of that solution that are in scope for us that we're going to have to get prices on to put in place, to build or put in the plan. And that design comes from a set of business requirements or the problem that started this whole situation in the first place. So there's a whole bunch of activities that go into that business case. And what we're trying to do is achieve business benefits, those benefits that exceed the cost. And what is a benefit? Well, the Business Encyclopedia says a benefit is a tangible outcome of an action or decision that contributes towards reaching one or more business objectives. So benefits help us move towards these higher level business objectives. In fact, these objectives are why we're doing a project. And a project may support multiple objectives, and the project will create benefits. And the idea is that those benefits are essentially steps towards meeting those objectives. So you may have several business benefits in place that help you achieve one objective, or maybe several benefits collectively together help you achieve an objective. There's two kinds of benefits, right? Financial benefits, which is what we often look about, hard or tangible benefits, but there's also soft or intangible benefits, non-financial benefits. So a hard benefit could be a reduction in call center traffic, and then we save about $20 per call for each call we can avoid. You can multiply the number of calls by that figure and figure out what the financial savings are. Non-financial benefits are things like improvement of brand image, improvement, things that are hard to quantify. I can make up some numbers, but I'm faking it. I really don't know what the real numbers are going to be. We're just guessing, right? Reduction of wait times for processing customer orders. Now, that's a good thing. You know that instinctively, but what's the financial benefit of that? There might not be one, right? It might be hard to quantify. Some projects are mostly non-financial, right? If you're working on building community engagement, it's a public sector project. That's a good goal, but there may be no financial return. It's measured in other things, or improving an image, improving your image, right? Great objective may not lead to money, especially in public sector projects, right? There may not be a financial return for a project. The return might be measured in these soft or intangible benefits. So we have to be
Kevin,
careful.
just a quick question.
Yeah, sure.
This deck will be available later on, right? We don't need to take notes and stuff, because I'm
all
finding
of
it hard
this,
to take notes and listen to you as well.
all of this will be available afterwards with the recording of the voiceover and all that stuff. It'll take a couple of days, but we'll make it all available. Thank you.
No, recording or the copy of the slides, both, right?
Everything. I'm going to make it available at the end, but I'd like to hold off questions till we get
No
to the
problem.
end.
No, I
have a few
just
more
wanted to
slides.
interrupt because it was sort of interfering with the way I was kind of sort of take notes and listen to you as well. So thank you.
Certainly. Thank you. So one of the things we can do is build a benefits breakdown structure. We do work breakdown structures, right, in our projects, trying to break down the scope into its pieces. Sometimes we do risk breakdown structures to help us understand the risks on a project. We can also do benefits breakdown structures. So in this case, we have a theoretical project, right, a park expansion project. We can look at what are the major benefits for this project. We said we want to increase services to the local community. Well, what does that mean? How do we break that down? Well, we can break that down into better outdoor youth recreation opportunities, more outdoor event areas, new garden club meeting space. These are benefits, but what specific deliverables are helping me drive those benefits? And then we can get into the jungs, the picnic tables, the compost boxes, the shelters. What are the specific things that we need to build as scope in our project to deliver these benefits? So another way of looking at it is the benefits breakdown happens kind of before the work breakdown. It's sort of the input into the work breakdown when we're trying to define the scope of the project. Because we shouldn't be doing deliverables because somebody thought it was cool or because we normally do it this way. You should be creating deliverables because they're directly contributing to those business benefits that were the justification for the project. So it's just another tool that you can look at. And as you can see here on the right side, the grassy areas, that meets multiple objectives, right? So some of these deliverables may support multiple business objectives. That's fine, but use these business objectives to make sure that you're not building deliverables that are not creating or adding direct business value. Now, business benefits come from these deliverables. It's nice to have a strategy about the objectives and everything, but the benefits don't happen until these deliverables are created. So benefits realization is all about building the right deliverables and delivering them the right time to the right people with the right supports, right? It's all about focusing on these deliverables. The project makes a huge investment. We invest a lot of time and money during the project life cycle to to build or create the capabilities or conditions that we were looking for as the scope of the project. But it's not until the project is officially ends, right? We've done the build, everything's done, the new facility is open, or we've created the new process and we've launched it, it's done. At that point, that's when benefits start to accumulate. So the actual return on investment happens typically after the project is delivered, is when the benefits start to accumulate. And we need to respect that our project life cycle isn't just build it. From the sponsor's perspective, the owner's perspective, it's longer. We need to earn some of those benefits. And we might want to monitor the projects as a PMO, monitor their performance, make sure the benefits are being achieved. It's not just, well, the project's signed off, the deliverables are done, the project's over, let's move on to the next one. Because if it never earns the benefits, you're not serving the needs of the business. You're not really serving the organization. So our monitoring and keeping an eye on projects, the shepherding of that project should probably carry on a little bit longer so we can see that these benefits are actually happening. You may not have to stay there for years and watch all the benefits accumulate, but at least see that that process is happening, that there are benefits starting to be obtained. So how can you get ahead of the curve on this? What can you do to help you prepare to have this more benefits realization focus? Well, some of the critical things you need. First, make sure the stakeholders are buying in to this process, right? They're going to have to be changing the way they discuss projects with you. They're going to have to tell you what the business case is, maybe justify the projects a little bit more. It's not just, well, I've got budget, I got to spend it this year, so I just made up some pet projects that'll use up the budget. That's not driving business value. We're going to put a little bit more focus on, are you investing in the right things? Are you do you have the right visions? Are your objectives aligned with our strategy? Start to get involved in more of those kinds of discussions. We don't always have, as PMO leads, we don't always have the control over those spends. They're in those departmental budgets, but we can be thought leaders. We can push best practices. We can guilt people into being a little bit more rational with their investment decisions. We should be that voice advocating for more objective and thoughtful business strategy around initiating projects. Assign ownership to benefits realization. The project managers might say, well, all the deliverables are done on time, on budget. I'm done. I walk away off to my next project. Who's looking after, do those benefits actually get used? I ran a project one time for a major municipality who shall not be named. And the municipality invested $3.5 million in a rather complex system that would save time and money. It would actually automate manual processes. And the business case was originally around getting rid of clerical positions. They figured they could get rid of 14 people, plus a manager and plus some other stuff, just in one department by using this new automated system, as well as impacts on some other departments that also had huge savings. At the end of this project, we were pretty much done. I was managing this project. We were pretty much done wrapping up everything. The final deliverables were just being accepted and signed off. And I turned to the sponsor of this one department. There were 3 sponsors from 3 departments that would use the system. I talked to the one sponsor of this one department. I said, I didn't hear about your plan about getting rid of these 14 people. Like, there were no communications around this. There's no strategy about what you're going to do with them. When is this going to happen? He laughed. He said, it's never going to happen. I said, I don't understand. And why not? He says, well, our salaries are largely based on the size of the departments we're running. And I've worked it a long time to get this department up to this size so I can get, the decent salary. That's part of it. He says, and honestly, he says, I can find some make work projects for these people. I don't want to get rid of them. I said, but the business case for this project was all around achieving these benefits from letting these people go. And he says, yeah, no, it's not going to happen. We're not going to do that. And I said, well, then why did you do this project in the first place? Oh, we want to be a world-class city. Well, great, but that wasn't one of the stated business objectives. That wasn't the strategy around this. So we got to be very careful. If there are benefits realization targets, who's responsible for achieving them? Is there a plan to get those benefits realized? Who's doing that? I mean, I would advocate these need to be line items in my project plan, in the work breakdown structure, making sure that the unions have been notified, that the staff are ready, that we have a offboarding plan. This should be part of the plan if that's what your original intent is, and assign owners and track it like any other project deliverable. And we need to track the benefits achievement throughout the project life cycle, all the way through, because benefits realization doesn't just happen at the end. That's where a lot of the benefits start to accumulate, but benefits realization activities start much sooner in the process around communications, training, building support materials. All of these things need to work their way into the project scope. So make sure there's a plan on each project to achieve the benefits. Get your PMs to build deliverable-based plans, not task-based plans. Task-based plans, you get so caught up in the weeds of how you're going to do the work, we might miss what you're going to do. Or prioritization is hard when you have a process-centric view, like a task-based view. But strategically, if we do a deliverable-based view first, we can prioritize deliverables because there might be quick wins, early wins, big bang for the buck, low-hanging fruit, whatever you want to call it. That's based on deliverable-based planning. Then we can figure out, after we've prioritized the deliverables and done some deliverable-based planning, then we can break down the tasks that are needed to build those pieces. If we take a task-focused view, sometimes we optimized for efficient delivery, the efficient steps to go through without thinking about the business case, right? So the order it takes to build things efficiently might not be the best in terms of delivering business value sooner. So take that deliverable-based planning first and focus on delivery of business value, then build your task-based, activity-based plans. Report and forecast business value delivery to your sponsors, to your stakeholders, to council if you're in a city. That's an important aspect so they can see that what they wanted is actually happening. And make sure that optimization happens always, not just at the end. We don't just do lessons learned at the end of a project. We should be looking at how we can optimize during the life of a project, because we can apply lessons learned from last month to more efficiently manage how we do work this month. Even if the project is many months long, you have many opportunities to improve efficiencies, which again is an element of business benefits realization. There's a technique you could borrow from Agile and use this on any project. Agile has something called earned business value, which is we assign business benefit value to each deliverable or work package. And over time, we can measure how much of that value has been achieved. And typically, this value earning happens after project launch, once people start using these deliverables. So I may have created a deliverable in February, but it's not going to get used until April when the project launches. Now I can start to accumulate measure the value that should have accumulated by now through its use. These are one of the tools that PMOs can use to show the success of the projects they managed, to show how much value or how much savings there are, how much new revenue is being generated, or whatever metric you're looking for. These are just some of the tools that we can use to help track and manage business benefits. Now I've got a couple minutes for questions. We've got just 2 or 3 minutes. Do we have any questions? You can just unmute and shout out your question, or you should be able to type it into the chat window.
Sorry, I was just typing. Kevin, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hi, this is Alex Tang from York Regional Police. So the example from the municipality. So at that point, when you were speaking to that executive, then when we're talking about accountability in that instance, where does it fall in terms of the project not really, I guess, coming to fruition, right? It didn't do what it was supposed to do.
Yeah.
Because this person that was involved never wanted to really see it through. So where does the accountability rest in that situation?
Yeah, I understand. So what was happening in this organization, and I don't want to mention names because some of you might know the parties involved. So what happened in this particular situation was once the project was approved by, in this case, City Council, once City Council had approved the budget and approved the project, the sponsor just has to deliver that project in the right fiscal year. And they could say, hey, we succeeded. We did what you asked us. There really isn't the proper measurements and accountability metrics to measure, and did it actually work in the long run? And often counselors aren't around long enough sometimes to measure that either. If they're only around for one election cycle, sometimes these benefits take a while to accumulate. So our existing system is kind of broken because we're not looking at the ROI for our projects. We guess what it might be as a way of justifying the project, but we're not actually tracking it properly later. And this is, I hate to say it, but it's more of a problem in public sector than it is in nonprofit and in private sector. In nonprofit, they have no money. They desperately are begging to find money. And when they finally get some, they really try to spend it efficiently because there's not a lot of it flying around. So there's more of a focus on, are we getting return? And sometimes there's private donors, and private donors will give the money, but they want oversight over the project. So there tends to be a little bit more accountability for results in nonprofit, not exclusively, but there tends to be a bit more. And in private sector, especially in small and medium-sized businesses, there's a proprietor. It's their money that's being invested. They're going to be watching it a lot more closely to get those returns. Then you get into the larger corporate world where it's some investors' money. You never meet the investor. There's millions of investors. There's nobody's really in charge of those results. There's management. They have objectives they're trying to hit, but those objectives change frequently. It's nice if you hit the target. If you don't, it's probably not the end of the world because things will change next year anyway. So in the corporate world, there's a little bit less focus on benefits realization than in nonprofit, but still better than public sector. In public sector, often I've done what I was told to do, which is deliver this thing. And there is nobody who's assigned the benefits realization objectives or goals or targets often. In some cases there are. I'm not saying it never happens, but I'm saying often there's nobody in charge of achieving those longer term strategic goals. If we didn't get it this year, we'll try again next year. So sometimes that's the thinking, and it's a real challenge. I work with a lot of public sector organizations that are trying to change this culture, but they struggle because there's that lack of proprietorship or ownership of the results.
Thank you. No,
Good.
A lot of what you said resonates with. I also work in public sector, so that I hear what you're saying.
Excellent. Thank you. I have time for another question.
Kevin, you talked about earned business value, and you showed money value to that. And a lot of times what you do may not have a money benefit. So how do you then deal with that benefits tracking when there's a non-monetary benefit?
Sure. So let me just switch back to that slide. Earned business value is an agile metric. And in agile projects, they try and assign a dollar value to each piece. Now, in public sector projects, sometimes there is no dollar value. So say, for example, I'm working for the Ministry of Health for my province, and my project is to come up with a new scheduling process for hip replacement surgeries. So instead of a 3-year waiting list, we can get it down to 3 months, right? That would be a tremendous benefit to the poor people in the population who are dealing with mobility issues and tremendous amounts of pain because they have to wait for the surgery, right? They can't walk, they're in a wheelchair, they're in pain. So if we could shorten those wait times for those surgeries, tremendous benefit, but there's probably no dollar value. The surgery is still going to cost the same when it does happen. We're just scheduling them faster. So our metric here might not be dollars. It might be what's the average wait time for a surgery, and we can track how that improves over time. We need to figure out what is the business objective. And if the business objective is reducing wait times, then let's track the wait times and show how we are actually achieving those objectives. In this example, I used a dollar-based one, but it could be something else, right? It could be call center volume, number of calls or complaints that come in. It could be wait times, right? That you're for a surgery. It could be something else. But the idea is those are the earned objectives. Those are the earned business values that you're looking for. Doesn't have to be in dollars. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.